The grokky horror picture show. Okay. I excommunicated, but my language was dated. So my words were gated as my prose was weighted. Now I am hated for that which I stated. My past was excavated and others were baited to things unrelated. They'll never be sated. My future is faded. My image ablated. Now I'm X-rated and excommunicated. I've been defrocked for posting something that I grokked.
Hey, y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. I am with Dr. Scott Walter again. We were supposed to do a full-on factory tour talk today, but this is my fault. I'm exhausted from traveling back from Texas. And so we're going to do a little hors d'oeuvre or aperitif or something like that. And an aperitif to the aperitif was Scott's poetry at the beginning. So, and actually you were talking about the many hats that I wear, but actually it's the religious studies professor that's my dad that's the best hat, because of course excommunication is perfect for that. So anywho, so today we're gonna talk a little bit about the structural battery pack, but honestly, I don't think that's particularly interesting. The more because it looks just like the Model Y. The more interesting thing is the door frame and the aluminum or whatever the sort of structure behind it. All right, so this is a still from a video, so it's not perfectly framed, but this is for anybody who doesn't know. This is where the batteries are. So these would be 4680 batteries, and this is actually rails, and these are the front two seats, and the back two seats actually will sit directly over what I believe is called the penthouse, which is where
the penthouse. Yep.
So yeah. So first of all, they didn't tell us.
There's a reason why the rear seats aren't on there, and you might want to point out why they're not mounted on there.
Go for it.
It's because the rear seats fold up, not down, right? For storage. Yeah. So normally you would put it on down there, but the backs of the seats are what are kind of mounted, and then the seats are able to fold up. So I guess because of that, it doesn't have to go directly onto the structural battery pack.
And I also want to make a note here that they were talking about how there is no Tesla branding in the car. Well, there's Tesla branding right there.
There it is. Yeah, but they wasted a little bit of plastic there. Just think of the plastic they could have saved if they didn't put that there.
I think that's stamped into the aluminum. I think it's stamped into the top, but
it's stamped in. Is that an aluminum? It doesn't look like aluminum stamping. Does it look? It's hard to tell.
I mean, it could be molded plastic, but I just assumed
it looks like molded
those
plastic.
are bolts that are coming up through there. So yeah, I guess it could be plastic in that case. So true that. So but they didn't tell us at the delivery event, but in Marquise Brownlee's, I believe. Anyway, in several of the reviews, they have specified 123 kilowatt hours. And I'm trying to remember, what was the largest ever before? Was it the Model X? Did they have maybe a little over 100 kilowatt hours, maybe like 105?
I think, probably maybe a little bit over. I think the S is like 100, and then the Y is what, 73, or it's somewhere around there, or 75.
And then the standard range Model 3 that we have is only 55 or 58. So this is, double plus that. So it's an impressively large battery pack. But not that big. Like the Hummer is over 200 kilowatt hours. So, compared to,
so I think it's like 225 or 250. It's like not just over 200, it's over 200. And I was surprised it was that much. So it's like two of those packs. Yeah.
Right.
And it doesn't get better range as a result either, which is rather remarkable or unremarkable, I should say. It should, but
it will fill quickly, and it will cost you a lot less to charge this thing. When you're paying per kilowatt hour, that's however much it is.
Exactly. So the Hummer will take forever to fill, and then you don't get the, you get maybe the same range as you're seeing in a Cybertruck.
Right. Yeah. And it costs about twice as much to fill it as this thing does. So these are impressive things. People didn't talk enough about that. And Scott, I don't know if you want to talk about the event that you think might have impacted the delivery event. Maybe we can save that for the end. That's like it's speculation. But anyway, so this is very, very, very similar to the Model Y structural battery pack that we have seen previously, just on a larger scale, obviously. But these are also 4680 batteries inside here. I talked to one of the battery technicians, and he said that the batteries are mounted such that if there's thermal runaway, they will, the sort of weak point in the battery is downward. So they will, a single cell, if it had thermal runaway and actually caught fire, would actually catch fire downward and eject out of the bottom of the vehicle rather than into the vehicle or into another battery. So that's actually good news as well. Not that that should happen.
So John, you said they're on a larger scale. No,
Yes.
they're not on a scale. They're actually on normal jacks.
Okay, fine. They're on larger jacks in that case.
Yeah.
We can also see a little bit of the Cybertruck design cues here, because we've got some angular edges to things. The pipes that are holding this up are angular. I really like the design cues that are between those two. Okay, so let me see if you can see this. If I just switch, can you see the other one or not, or do I have to stop sharing? I probably have to stop sharing.
Not yet.
Yeah, okay. Let me stop sharing and then start with the other one. All right. What a pain that you can't do that. Okay. So here is the other interesting part. So again, this is a still frame from a video. I'm going to rotate back a little bit. So this is one of the doors. I honestly couldn't tell you if it's the front or the back. I think it's the front, but they're just giant slabs of stainless. So this is what you see on the outside of the vehicle. That's the door. And then it would have the glass that would come up around the outside. But the interesting question, and the thing everyone was like, how do you attach stainless steel to the body of the vehicle?
The body
and in
itself.
This case, the door.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, it's pretty obvious you use some sort of fasteners or something like that.
Right.
But if they did that, it would be very visible.
Exactly.
So that's where the mystery is coming. It's like, how are they doing these attachments without us noticing it?
Right.
So there is some backing.
Right.
In this case for the door, and we're going to see when it comes to the body panel, they also have like some sort of backing that allows them to mount onto the frame. The still question is like, okay, but how do you get that outer skin onto there without noticing anything? Now you might say, well, normally what you would do with like an aluminum door is that you would just bend the aluminum around and hem it around the door.
Right.
So that's what's going on there. Yeah.
Pretty much any other car. If you look on your car, look at the door. I always notice this when I'm cleaning it, you see how it's just kind of crimped around the edge.
It's the crimping that goes around there that holds it in. So that's what keeps it in, but you can't do it with the stainless steel.
Right.
It's laser cut. You cannot bend it around to give it any sort of hem along there. So if they were using fasteners, you would see it on the other side. And the only way you would be able to hide that blemish on the other side is that you would paint it, with a couple layers of paint, but we know it's not painted. So it's like, so, I mean, how are they doing it? It just seems like there's some kind of magic going on here, trying to figure out what it's going to be. And it's probably a combination of things. Yeah.
So first of all, here's the stainless on the outside. So it's obviously a skin, and I can't remember how many millimeters thick it is, but it's, it's reasonably thick.
I think it's 1.8 or something like that.
1.8.
I remember hearing 1.8.
Or 1.8 millimeters.
Millimeters.
Yeah,
so it's just under 2 millimeters.
Yeah. Okay. So 1.8 millimeters here, 1.8 centimeters. I would have been like, but anyway, and then you can see that we assume this is an aluminum like subframe behind the rest of the vehicle, behind the door. You can see here that there are attach points, so the pieces can be attached to each other and things, but none of that explains exactly how the stainless is attached. Up here, there looks to be one variety of attachment, which could actually be some sort of welding points. So if the stainless is
that'd be welding points for maybe a bracket that's underneath. Because that's still the aluminum that we're seeing there. So and then the question is, how does that bracket then get attached? And we've heard a variety of different ways. One is and we've seen it in other footage, which I think we'll get to later, or they had a crashed Cybertruck that was out front that everyone could look at. And so from it, you could sort of see how the things were being peeled apart. And it's very clear that adhesives is in the mix. There is some use of adhesives that get on there. That would make sense. But it's not the only way that it's attached.
Right.
The other speculation
I was trying to figure out where the window actually goes. And I think the window may be on the inside of here. It's a little bit unclear because this all seems to be one piece coming around. So I'm not sure where the window would go.
Or whether it goes between, it might go between those. It's hard to see whether there's a gap there for the window to go, because I would assume the window is on the inside of that.
Yeah. So, but basically you can see that we have, so again, two different kinds of metal. You can weld two different kinds of metal together, but it doesn't work very well. But you certainly would see blemishes on the outside.
You would notice it. You would notice some sort of discoloration, or the penetration it can be done, but you just have to make sure that you have very very precise control of the weld as you're doing it. And that means you're not using, it's not being spot welded, that's for sure.
Yeah.
They're not going to be using any TIG or MIG welding, standard kind of arc welding along there. It's more likely that they're using something like laser welding, where they have very precise control and that you don't get that much penetration through there to be able to keep it in place.
So the basic idea,
so
one way to do it, of course, is to use a very high degree of adhesive. And in the factory tour itself, I saw places that we were talking about this, where it was obvious, it was in sort of a dry run mode, so it wasn't doing it, but it was obviously drawing some sort of a bead. It would do that under normal circumstances, and then it would squish it together. And actually, one of the factory tour guides actually talked about how they placed, I think it was the window. He was like, oh yeah, we placed the windows on very, very early in the process because they've got to cure as it's going down the line. So clearly that has to do with the adhesive that they're putting on. So adhesive is one good way. Another way, of course, is just geometric, because if you look here, this is going to be a little bit like a hanger. It's going to sit and gravity is going to pull on it, and it's going to keep it from wanting to fall off. But then the other part is what looks like these little dots here could potentially be some sort of weld or something.
But that's very far away from the skin. So I think that's for something that might be underneath it. So the question is, what is underneath it? So what they may have is, something else which is attached to the skin, and then maybe that is somehow then connected to the substructures there. There was some speculation that there may be like some very small attachment points that are sticking out that are somehow also kind of tack welded in various locations, a fastener that can then be pulled in and connected. No one's seen enough to know for sure. They seem to be thinking of laser welding. And I was certainly thinking about that when I saw the Cybertruck in Tampa, looking at the whole thing. It just seemed like magic that these things were attached. And how could they not be falling down? Not seeing how it was on there. I was speculating that they might have been doing like some laser welding in a few places to put it on there. And I wasn't sure. I was looking in the rear quarter panel along the upper part, and I thought about an inch down, I was seeing what might be kind of a straight line that was just like very lightly blue, but I wasn't sure if I was like seeing things, if it was really there or not, or if it's just kind of an optical illusion. So it clearly that might have been the only kind of distortion you may have seen. It wasn't like it was bumped or raised or anything else. And again, I could have just been fooling myself because I was looking around looking for something, and it could just been the lighting conditions and everything else, and the fact that everything is straight back there. So what we know is it's being attached to some sort of backing, and then the backing is how it then gets attached onto the frame itself. So the trick is how they get attached to the backing. Sealant is definitely used for sure.
Yeah. And also you can see there's sort of a gasket running down the length of this. And actually, if you look down at the bottom, you can see there's a gap in the gasket right here. So in terms of waterproofness, that's not great, because that should definitely be filled in, but it looks like it's true in the back too, but there is sort of a gasket on the edges.
Yeah, I'm trying to think is like, okay, so the waterproofness, because you probably, it's nice to not get it in there. Sometimes you almost want it because you want like a weep hole to let water be able to exit, because water is going to get in there anyway. And the main thing is that there's another inner gasket on there to make sure the water doesn't get into the cabin. That's what you really care about. So I was expecting water is going to get in underneath and around there anyways, and make it in through those different holes. So that I don't know if there's any gasketing there to be able to hold it. If you're going to deep water, water is going to get in there, and there's going to be that other very heavy gasket that I remember seeing when the Cybertruck door was open. Like pretty clear that when you close that thing, no water's getting into the cabin. And the deeper you get in the water, the more that's being pushed up against it, and the harder it's going to be for the water to get in.
And the close on it is actually an active close. So you close it, and it does that thing where it hits, and then you feel it pull it in. So there's actually, it's like kind of it like sucks the door.
It's almost, it literally is like a spacecraft at that point. It's almost like the Apollo capsule. When they got in, they closed it, and then whoop, it would go into place.
Yeah. But I was also noticing, like, you can see that this is this must be something like aluminum, because it's much more ductile. So it's either
it's something that can be stamped. It's definitely stamped.
It's probably stamped. So it's stamped, and it can provide a great deal of structure, because even though the stainless is very hard, it's just one plane. Right. So it's not as strong. And this gives it a lot of extra, it's just all that backing and all that shape gives it a great deal more strength.
The
So
two together
yeah,
give lots of strength. And then the thing is you've got different materials that are coming together. So
right.
you need some way to be able to put together. And the other thing you got to remember is they've got different thermal coefficients of expansion.
Yes. Yes.
And
Exactly.
so if you fasten it too tightly, you're going to then create stresses in your attachment areas that you would like to have a little bit of relief in there somehow, which is why they might be using adhesives in some places, because it has,
Right.
like, let's say, a little bit of forgiveness as opposed to a weld, which will be really strong and kind of very brittle. You could imagine if
Right.
you're getting different displacements between the two materials, between different areas. So yeah, a lot has to be considered when joining those things together and how that's done on the door.
Yeah.
So then I
And if
think we
for
move on
people
to
who might
another
not be
panel.
getting that point, it's if you take this to the desert or something, and it's 140 degrees Fahrenheit or something, and then you
Mhm.
took it immediately and put it in the Canadian Arctic or something, and it's like minus 20 degrees, the aluminum and the steel are going to expand and contract at different rates. And so that
Yes.
is going to create stresses between them if you have completely rigid attach points, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So very,
Which is
very
sometimes, like, a lot of time fasteners almost intentionally have a little bit of give in the holes, right?
right.
So when they're in there, it'll just allow you to get a little bit of that movement, but still hold it pretty rigidly.
Yeah. So it's still not completely clear, but obviously there are a lot of internal attachments. There's a lot of internal structure to this. It's interesting how Franz talked about how there's, like, so few curves on the outside of the vehicle, but you've got lots of curvy looking stuff going on in
On the
here
inside.
as soon as you
Yeah.
get inside of it. And then, of course, I guess this would be the empty part of the door where you might have the bucket where you could put items and
Mhm.
things like that. So
Mhm.
yeah, you would put the facing over the top of this to make it have a door handle and all the basic stuff that you would expect out of a door. But it's relatively lightweight looking, and you can see there's just, like, this whole center section here looks like it's the external steel exoskeleton there. So it's not completely aluminum subframe underneath it all. Also, this is interesting down here because this would be the structure that holds up, like, if you have like a whatever that pocket is over there to put a bunch of junk in, you're putting water bottles and things like that, that it's going to weigh something. And so how does this attach? Again, looks like the best guess is some sort of adhesive there, although there are two um bolt holes, but that could be just to hold the plastic in place. That's
Yeah,
the
and I'm not sure if that's actually the skin or not, or might just, like, be an interior part of it. It's hard to
it could
tell.
be.
I think
It's hard
or
to
maybe
tell.
now you do see what's rather interesting there. You see that silver tape that's kind of put on
Right,
there.
right.
I think that's like sound dampening.
Just that piece of it, or do you think that's just a piece
Yeah,
of
yeah,
like
that's able to do something to somehow deaden the
right?
sound. I've seen that on, like, kitchen sinks. That
Yes.
you'll have these sinks that vibrate and do all these other things, and there's just, like, something like that. You just stick on the thing, and it absorbs enough of the
Right.
vibrational energy, it gets rid of it. So that might be there to help with the sound quality. Yeah.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah, and or like tennis rackets. I used to have those little rubber things that you would
Hmm.
stick in the fork of the tennis racket to keep it from vibrating. So,
Yep. Yep. It's
in
just,
fact,
and
actually,
it's
a
surprising that it's not,
dishwasher.
like, along the whole range of
Yeah,
it. It's just like, whoop, stick it right there, and evidently
right.
that's probably the sweet spot right there.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's true. And I looked at our Bosch dishwasher at one point, and that's an incredibly quiet dishwasher, and it's not, like, completely encased in soundproofing material. It just has little blobs like this from place to
Hmm.
place that they've clearly tuned to get rid of the most
Yep.
violent of the noises. So yeah, so really, really interesting. But it demonstrates why the door is relatively lightweight. I did not notice it, I wasn't sort of pushing it on an uphill basis, and I only got to open it and close it a couple times, but it didn't seem heavy. The door didn't, it wasn't like, oh my gosh, those big wooden doors that you open at somebody's house and you're like, this thing's got a ton of weight behind it. It felt relatively light and easy to open and close. And yeah, so you're not thinking like stainless steel is massively heavy, because I guess the trade-off is you don't have as much substructure underneath it that's
Hmm.
weighing something. So yeah. All right. Let's see what else I got here. If there's anything else, we also have some motors. So nice electromechanical differential lock for off-roading. So very cool. That's the front drive unit, by the way. So that's the single motor. Let's see if I can get a good shot of that. I think I've got one here. Yeah, so this is the single motor. So there's just the one unit, and then the two in the back. I'm trying to remember if I actually had that in this video or not. I don't believe I do. No. Yeah, so I in the factory itself, I have the dual motor, but you can see how if I would stay still for a second. It was hard. There were a lot of people around. It was very active. But yeah, it's a relatively small unit, and as far as I understand it, all of these motors are new. They're not copies of the other ones. And so that's very interesting. I assume that this is some sort of coolant like lead or something that allows, you know, the lubrication and the coolant to go through the motor as it needs to. But yeah, anyway, very interesting stuff. And they did not have these taken apart so you could take a look at the insides of them, but the outsides were very attractive. And the dual motor on the back was really cool because it's not twice as big. They crammed both of the motors in a pretty small amount of space, and it was very impressive how they did that. So certainly not like the Rivian where they have one on each wheel, basically. Here you've obviously got a more traditional style where it's got the axles that come out, and you've got differential locks and things like that go on. So really interesting. I'll be curious to find out how they did the differential lock on the front motor, honestly, because usually that's done not in the motor itself, but in the differential that's sort of a separate unit in most gas cars. So yeah, very cool. It's very cool stuff. And like I said, this is just a flavor. This was outside of the factory, and we're going to get into the factory, and we're going to look at how manufacturing is done, what sort of cheating they were, not cheating, but you know, how they were able to create things as quickly and as efficiently as possible. One of the things that blew me away, I'll just as a preview of it, is the size of the front glass, the front windshield. And I don't recall if anybody ever said exactly how heavy it is, but it is very heavy. And it takes this whole sort of giant robot structure to like hold it, move it around and everything.
Yeah. So they probably get a really big end of arm tooling. I assume it's a vacuum gripper of some sort.
Yeah.
And yeah. So, and then they've probably got a pretty big robot just to be able to manipulate it because of the size, not so much of the mass, but because of the size, and it grabs it from all the different corners. Did they show it being sealed?
I believe that's what, again, I'm going to have to go back and look at it because everything.
Yeah. Because usually what it'll do is a robot will come over with this big gripper
and then
grab the glass out of the pallet, flip it over.
Right.
And then it goes over to an area where there's a sealant gun that's stationary. And then the glass is moved underneath it, just moves it around like that. Right. And then when it's done, it goes over, flips it over, and then places it right onto the truck at that point. So that way you're not doing handoffs from one to another. It's like one robot is able to do the whole thing, picking and placing as well as the sealant. So you don't have like another robot necessarily going over and putting the sealant bead around it, which is like one way you could traditionally do it. So yeah, it's a more efficient way of doing it. And it's kind of counterintuitive because usually you move the tool and not the part. And now the tool's fixed, but you're moving the part itself. Right. And of course, if you think about it, that's exactly how like a lot of saws work, right? You know, the saw still and you table saws that way versus the one you get in your hand where you go around. So there's just, there's two ways of doing it. And now I think we looked at the power steering unit, the fly-by, or not the drive-by-wire.
Yes, fly-by-wire. Sure, why not?
And I think, you know, so we speculated whether those two motors that they have there were like derived from the Optimus. And right now I'm wondering if not, because I think it was mentioned that those are like 5 horsepower. Yeah. Yeah. And I think I did the conversion, like 5 horsepower. How many watts is that? And I looked at it, I was like, I think 3,500 watts. I'm like, whoa, that's a lot of power.
That's a lot.
and I think Optimus is like supposed to be operating between 100 watts and 500 watts. So it's like, wow, you know, factor 7 kind of out of there. It doesn't mean that some of those motors couldn't, you know, draw that at some point in it, but it might be that they are, you know, bespoke for this particular application and not just based on that. Right.
So yeah, and of course we haven't seen Optimus in over a year now. So there's there's a reasonable, at least that detail of it. So there's a reasonable possibility that we have some iterations on all of that with Optimus as well. So If they are different, yeah, 5
Yeah.
horsepower is a big motor. But if they are different, they probably have the same lineage. They're probably, you know, the same people.
Yeah,
are probably
there's going to be,
working on them.
they know how to build the motors, and they just kind of scale up. But I was like, man, 5 horsepower, and like each of them with 5 horsepower just to turn a wheel. Wow.
Right.
I didn't realize that.
And of course, we didn't see the, well, I always go back to remembering what like 1920s and 30s truck drivers looked like. They had huge arms because before the days of power steering, power assisted steering, in order to turn a truck, you know, a heavy truck with laden with gear or something like that, it took a huge amount of muscle power. So those guys were really strong. So yeah,
and,
so
and
I
usually
think,
the wheels were also pretty big for that reason.
right,
Just so you got the mechanical advantage when trying to turn it around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean the steering, the wheel in the cab.
Yeah, the truck steering wheel was huge. It wasn't like what we're used to right now, something like this. It was like that. Bring it around.
Yeah. So I think all of us have become kind of wussy because we just expect to have the power assisted steering. And so we don't really notice. But you know, when you think about it, you got,
oh, I've noticed, I've had to go out before when I was driving a car and like, whoa.
Yeah.
And then the little Akamoto had to have power steering, and it is hard to drive when
it was
not going very,
really
if you're moving,
it
it's okay. But when you're stationary, it was like really cranking to get that thing around. So yeah.
Yeah, same thing for a golf cart, things like that. If you notice it when you're doing that, and those are small vehicles. If you imagined a Cybertruck, but you had to turn that yourself,
this is maybe why they need 5 horsepower to pull it off.
Exactly. Yeah. And they didn't show us the back, but I assume it's got to have the same thing in the back too. And even if it's only 10 degrees each direction, it's got to operate at low speed. So very interesting. Did you see that the wheels turn in opposite directions at low speed to give you a very like tight turning radius, but at high speed they turn the same way, so that you kind of, as you're crossing lanes, you kind of are sliding across the lanes rather than
yeah, the vehicle dynamics is rather interesting. And the different speed regimes you have in there of what kind of work and figuring out the turning radius. It's actually a bit tricky to do it for a 4-wheel. I mean, nowadays it's pretty easy, but originally they used to cheat, and they had what they called the bicycle model of the car. They just kind of pretended it was actually behaving like a bicycle. It was too hard to actually figure out the forces that were coming from 4 wheels.
Right. Yeah, it gets crazy. And of course, the reason why you don't differential lock normally, because people might naively think, well, just do that always. But number one, you want to be able to put power to where you need to. But the bigger reason is because if you are making a turn so that these wheels are locked together and they have to rotate 360 degrees at the same time, you turn it, the inside one is not going as far as the outside one. So one of them is going to have to slip in order to make
yes, which is why you have a differential in a normal car for that reason when you're going around. So now by having that sort of control on all of them, you're never going to slip. I have never had my wheels chirp in the Model Y. Not
I haven't either.
chirp.
The Model 3 does, however. It definitely does, because it's only got the rear wheel power. So you can kick it and all of a sudden it'll kind of skitter a little bit.
Or if you're Lance King.
Yes, we had the pleasure of driving with the CEO of Cyberlander.
And I didn't know a Model 3 could fishtail.
Yes. And he was very proud of that too. I don't know. He's got it in performance.
He knows what he was talking about there, you know, and it's like we're coming around the corner pretty fast, and he's kind of counter steering to break the skid and going on. It's like, wow, that was pretty impressive. But yeah, my Model Y, it's not like I don't sometimes punch it, and it never burns rubber, never does anything. I mean, even on road surfaces that are a little bit rough that you would expect you would slip, it just knows, it just stops. It's remarkable the amount of traction control they have. They make sure that your wheels will never whereas, I mean, growing up in New England, I was used to wheels spinning.
We used to do donuts
in
the parking lot. Yeah.
Well, but sometimes we didn't want the wheels to spin. You know, we're trying to get out of the driveway in the snow. And it's like, you got to keep that one from moving if you want it, because the other, you know, putting things underneath it to try to keep the thing from spinning out. And now to think that the software just fixes that problem.
Yeah, the world has changed an awful lot since we were kids. And I imagine, since I don't live in the north anymore, I don't experience the snow, but I don't know if you've driven a Tesla in the snow, but I have a few times.
Fortunately, not yet. No, I haven't seen the snow in a long time.
I have a few times, and it's worked very, very well. Oh, that is another thing. Speaking of the door, let's touch on that for just a second before we go. And that is the door presentation. So I assume that it has a walk up with your phone, right? That it would normally just pop open, but also you can physically push the button, and they said up to a 1/2 of an inch of ice, it would break. The door would pop open even with a 1/2 inch of ice. That seems like I mean, a 1/2 inch of ice is got a lot of strength behind it. That's impressive. So
That's a lot, but that's called like the first hour of nor'easter in Boston. It
yeah,
comes down, it's about a 1/2 inch of ice,
right.
and then you start throwing the slush on top of it, and then you start
Exactly.
throwing, the wet snow on top of that, and it
And-
always starts out that way. So yeah, you're going to need the strength, in
right.
some of the other climates that do drop down like that. Now that's good to know.
Right.
Um,
Well, but what it means is, again, they have something pretty powerful inside that door. It's not just a little, like, it's not unlocking it with a spring. That's just a little torsion bar that just
yeah,
kind of goes
it's
boom
must
and
be
opens
popping
it.
it out.
Yeah.
They
And I
must have
think that's
something.
why it actively closes as well, because when you close it, it closes like this, and then it seals itself. It pulls
Yeah,
itself
and I
in.
wonder what kind of actuator they're using. If they're using something like just a simple solenoid that just is able to like push it out,
Yeah.
um,
It's more than
but
that, though, because there's
it's
an
more than that since
initial
it's able to
bump.
pull it back in.
Right. There's an
Okay.
initial bump where it opens, and then it continues to open. So it's almost
Mhm.
like those drawers, those fancy drawers that you get in your kitchen where
Yeah.
you push it and then it almost closes and then it eases
And I
in.
have a feeling it's probably pushing in more than one place, because if you're just applying the force in one place, you end up getting a little bit
Yes.
of distortion around your hinges and then binding in there. So a lot of
Right.
times you need to pop it out in more than one place to get that to work successfully. You said there was like one other thing we wanted to talk about that we wanted to leave to the end.
Oh, yes. 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 Go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, that there were, after the event and everything was over, there were some reports of a Florida man that had intentionally come to the area after having, like, let's say, making lots of threats against the event, I guess weeks in advance. And he was picked up in the Austin area around that time, and which might be part of the reason why the event was a little bit late starting. But then again, every test event is always a little bit late,
Right.
and might be why Elon he seemed a little bit shaken. He
Right.
came out and he repeated himself a couple of times and just was like not there. And it
Right.
might have been that, he was like, they probably get some reports about that. And then the concerns of like, well, we don't know if this guy's a lone wolf.
Right.
Um, and that might have also been why the event was just kind of hurried and over. But then again, it was planned to not be a long event. It wasn't planned like, the Giga Texas rodeo or anything like that, the Giga rodeo where they had drones and everything else and a lot of
Yeah.
other stuff going on. So yeah, it was pretty much planned all along to be rather short. And, that was rather concerning. And then of course, the after party was like another potential soft target, but
Right.
fortunately was well protected. There were security guards there and everything
Yeah.
else.
Yeah. But it was scary because, you told me about that and I was like, oh my gosh, I was at both of these things. I would have been less inclined to believe that it could have happened at Giga Texas because, I mean, it's a big factory, so I guess there would be ways of sneaking in, but there's generally speaking a lot of security at that area. And certainly on that day they had metal detectors and, the
You can't. I
sheriff's
mean, it's hard
office.
to get in the
Yeah.
parking lot. It's
Yeah.
really hard to get in the parking lot without you really needing to be there. So I'm
Right.
sure that anything would have happened, it would have been way way far away from the event
Right.
itself.
Well, but the more scary part was honestly the after party because that was just an
Yeah,
open air. It was like kind of a bar, area, but it was
and
open
it
air.
was what was a bit weirder is when I walked from my hotel to there, and it was like I think around 12:30 or something like that, and there were a couple police vehicles that were racing on down and then pulled into this other side road. And I looked down that side road, I saw there was some other on the other side that had it closed off, and there was like obviously something going on there. Don't know if it was related at all. I don't think so, because I think where they said they picked him up, I don't was in the west side, and this was over on the east side. So it
Right.
was just probably normal day in the life of Austin or something like that
Right.
going on. Who knows?
But still, it is one of those things you don't think about a lot. But I did notice, especially at the after party, I noticed a lot of extra police presence. There were, Franz showed up, and then I guess Martin Vieja showed up after I had left. But so there
Mhm.
were a couple of pretty high up people from Tesla, and there were rumors that Elon might come, but given the fact that there was an active shooter out there, he probably was like, hell no. So, but you know, or sorry, not active. Sorry, there was somebody who
Not
was
active, but an alleged
saying that
guy,
he was going to do
yeah,
that. Yes.
yep.
So anyway, so that this is complete speculation, but there was a general sense that the event itself was a little bit less than stellar, because they didn't even, they didn't even talk about the vehicle to grid and the vehicle to load and the
Even the range extender wasn't
yeah.
really talked about. That was more or less talked about afterwards, and everyone starts tweeting. It's like, wait a minute, what's this all about?
Right,
And
right.
there's been a lot of speculation on that. It's definitely not a do-it-yourself thing, and it
No.
sounds like it's a factory install, or maybe
Oh,
it's something that can be done at the service center.
right,
So it's in the big question is that when you put it in, is it like in and really hard to take out, or is it
right,
something that you could then have easily removed to the service center?
right.
And whether it would eventually be a rental model that, hey, I don't need this thing all the time. I need it every now and then, but I would then like to go to the service center and have them pop it in, and then they can rent it out to someone else. And there was some good speculation about that this would be one way of reducing, let's say, the number of batteries that are kind of in circulation out there.
Right.
So you'd have enough to be able to build your vehicles, that you do something like this. But to really make it better would be to say it's, because one of the problems with a swappable, they say, is like, you need way more batteries for the swappable to work, and that kind of thing. So it's not really a swappable ecosystem. It's just a range boost when you need it.
Right.
And if you start putting it in everyone who wants it, well, now you're wasting those because they're sitting there because they don't really need it most of the time. It's just, you put it in there because they need it for that one trip a year. But if you allow them to take it out, then that battery pack can actually be used in maybe 10 vehicles. And you only need one of those battery packs as opposed to 10 battery packs. So it may be a way of being able to give everyone the range extension that they want without taking a lot of batteries out of circulation at first.
Right. Yeah. And I could see, let's say a hypothetical use case would be that you or I had the Cybertruck, and normally we just drove it around, but then once a year we went on a month or 6-week vacation where we towed a very large trailer. It would be great if we could just rent it for a month.
Yep. Exactly. So that would be better. So the rest of the time you're not toting it around, never really tapping into that pack. So that's that's the waste. You're getting really lousy fuel economy because you're carrying this very heavy thing. You're losing storage capability for your everyday kind of stuff.
Right.
So it does seem like a special use case. Not to say that there aren't people where that might be a really good use case every day if they're towing really heavy trailers and other equipment daily, going back and forth to different places or uphills. So there will be some, but for most people, they're going to be in there. So it seems to be more of a way of giving people the feeling that there is a solution to being able to get the longer range if they really need it, that it's available, and kind of calm them down and say, oh, all right, it's there. So the more you think about it, at first, it didn't seem like a brilliant solution, but now it may actually solve a lot of issues, definitely in the short term.
I think a lot of it has to do with, if it's permanently in there and you have to just basically get it and that's it, that's unfortunate.
Then
If
I would
it's
be
more
disinclined to get it.
Yeah, if it's more of you can load it in when you need it, and not even if you just bought it for yourself and just stored it in your garage. And honestly, if you could use it as a power wall when you weren't using it,
that would be great too. If and trust me, if they would come up with some sort of connector to do that they could sell to you also for $500,000 to allow you to do that. The only problem is that pack is so heavy. It's like your average person would not be able to take it out.
No, I don't think you
some
could
sort
do
of
it
lift
without
assist.
some sort of a lift assist.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's like most people in their garage, they don't have something like that, except for the people who, do work on their ICE vehicles and will have a lift for their engine. But otherwise, the average person doesn't have that. So it does make sense to go to a service center if it can be done. And this we don't know, because all I heard was that it sounded like it was factory installed, and others say, well, no, we think it can be done at the service center. And maybe it's one of those things that you can order after the fact and not necessarily when you order it.
Well,
that's still
even
an unknown.
less about if you put it in, because obviously they'll have to put it in for you, but it's a question of whether you can take it out afterwards. even if it's
Afterwards,
at
yeah.
the service center, it's like, is it
Even
kind
if,
of
yep.
permanently in there, like welded into place or something? Or is it more
Yeah.
like there's just a
Yeah.
couple of slots? That
I'm
you drop
assuming it's
these?
just kind of bolted in, and then they got to do something to make sure it's weatherproofed and a few other things, which is
Right.
probably why they want to do it at the service center, authorized service center.
Right.
And then, of course, it makes sense that you would have it. It has to be done at the service center. I don't think it's something that they can do with remote service. Someone
Right.
drives up the Model S with that thing. I mean,
No.
you see the remote service.
Yes,
That
it's
Model
driving
S
like this.
it's
It's
full.
like-
I mean, it's already. I'm amazed at how much they've already got back there for what they need to do in their normal visits. But
Right.
it's like, now you're going to ask them to take this battery pack that weighs a lot, and then how do they get it out of that thing? And I mean,
Right.
it's going to be impractical. So
Yeah.
it's probably a service center visit.
It
which
could be a
means-
service center, but they could also have, like where I live in Athens, we don't have a Tesla service center, but we have an authorized body shop. And so maybe that body shop could be authorized to have a couple of them too, or something.
Right. So that's the thing, is that for some people it might be really inconvenient because that service center is like 1 or 2 hours away.
Yeah.
And others, like I've got, well, they're setting one up in Sarasota that's going to be actually pretty close. So I've got like 3 possibilities, less than an hour from here. In Michigan, it's like 10 minutes away. So, but I just had to be lucky that it's there, and the supercharger is also 5 minutes away. But anywhere else in Michigan, it'd be hours away.
Right. Right. Yeah. So, I mean, but this is all for the future, obviously relatively small numbers of Cybertrucks for now. Even the soonest one, interestingly enough, it said that the earliest date was 2024, even though that's not that far away at this point. But you wonder when the actual kind of consistent like production volume is going to start coming out, because certainly I didn't look like they were like, oh yeah, and tomorrow we're going to do 10 more and then 15 more the next day. There was no indication that there was going to be a big surge of deliveries. Although Lance, speaking of, he said that someone he knows got a notification from Tesla and said, hey, configure your vehicle. So, so obviously it also has not completely stopped, and they haven't done any more. So there seems to be at least some movement forward. So that's good. And,
so
and maybe they're
hope
doing,
we'll get ours before the end of the decade then.
Yeah, yeah, great. It'll be 2030, baby. Yeah. I'm hoping that once they figure it out, the big thing in my mind is the bending of the steel. Because of the fact that it has
did you hear
back.
about that? That they're using air benders?
Yeah, I know the last
I'm trying to
airbender.
look into that, but no, seriously, that's what it's called. Air bending.
Right?
I'm trying to find the article that described it, but it's something like one of those hockey tables.
Yeah.
Where you have the air that's kind of coming out to make things float. And evidently they tried to do the similar principle with a tool that is going over the stainless steel metal to be able to bend it. And that way the tool never comes in direct contact. You've got an air cushion between it that allows it to sort of glide over it. And they call that an air bending process. And so I'm trying to find a little bit more. So in a future video, we can talk about it with a little bit more authority.
Yeah. I was actually trying to like pull it up and see if there was, oh, I see. Okay. The press brake. No, that's actually a press bending, but it looks like, I don't know. I guess you're just blowing incredibly
It might be like
high.
a press brake that has air built into it or some sort. Just
right.
Because it has something to do with the tool coming in contact with the stainless steel. Then you end up scraping it, or you end up leaving marks, and they wanted to not have that. And the best way is to, air. High pressure air is incredible lubricant. Think about it.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing, is it's very, very high pressure air. So
yeah, it has to be. So to me, as amazing, man, what kind of pressure that's got to be, and the compressor they have for that's got to be something else.
Right.
Well,
Yeah, I'm looking at like a bending. I'm looking at a bending crimping thing, but that's the mechanical one. So
yeah.
There's air bending with offset tools. I'm trying to see if I can find, sorry, I'm looking real quick to see if I can find anything that indicates where the air bending. Well, I don't know. I can share this real quick.
Yeah, the problem is I came
useful,
that close to finding it that there was something in there. Oh, what do you learn thinks about this on X?
Yeah.
And then I did something else. And then when it came back to my X feed, it was like, where was it? Where'd it go? Having to scroll. I don't know where it is.
Yeah. So it's 4 stars.
Yeah, that's
so
your
basically it's
break,
this idea right here,
Mhm.
except you're using air instead of actual mechanical forces to bend it. So
Yeah.
but steel has the one extra lovely part, which is that it it bounces back. It's got a
Well,
memory.
they all spring back. You know, that's a
So
problem
you
with
have
all
to
of them. They're going
you
to
have
spring
to
back.
overbend it, but you have to know
Yep.
how much you're overbending it so that it bends back. That's got to be nightmarish.
And then you get the other thing, if you go back to that image, is that
Yeah.
as you're doing it, there's a lot of deformation that's going in the metal. And sometimes you would like the metal to flow through there, but it can't
Right.
flow if you get all that friction.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so if you don't have those sharp corners in there as you apply that force, then it allows the material to flow a little bit and get rid of some of the stresses that would be in there. So that'd be another reason to want to use air bending.
Right. Right. Yeah. So somehow it's along the lines of doing this, except doing it without actually using a tool, but
Yeah,
using air.
yeah.
So I assume they're doing that while it's still very cold also, since it's cold rolled. They're not heating it so that they're making it more ductile. And then, because that would be another option, would be to heat it up a lot and then bend it while it's much more
That
ductile.
could be. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure what temperature you get up there that you get, increased ductility like that.
Yeah.
And
But
then
you
have to
also
be
can't
careful that
overdo that, or else you break up the
you lose
Sandy got into that about the martensite versus the
austenite. Yeah. There's austenitic steel, stuff like that. It's like, oh, that's appropriate.
Now he was telling me, here's an interesting thing. He was saying that stainless is not magnetic, but I had my little DJI microphone that has a magnetic clip on the back, and I stuck it right on the side of the Cybertruck, and it stuck.
Oh, that's interesting.
It was highly magnetic. It was very like I had to yank it to pull that thing off.
Normally stainless steel is not magnetic.
So,
but it depends upon the kind of stainless steel. And I think if it's like really high, because stainless steel is a bit of a misnomer. It's almost like more like chromium with a dash of iron in it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of chromium and really, really high quality stainless steel. But there's other different grades where I think you use nickel and some other things in there. So the alloy means that they might have a higher percentage of iron in there. And does nickel have magnetic properties?
Oh man, I couldn't tell you that.
I don't know if it has a little bit.
It was just one of those. I wish I'd filmed it. I don't think I did, but I had it in my hand and I was like, well, it's got a magnet on the back. And I went, my refrigerator is magnetic and that's stainless steel. So it's not at all unlikely that a version of stainless steel is magnetic.
Yeah. So there's some that are not. And then like if you go to, I'm trying to think what are the stainless steels that you would notice that. It has to probably be a high enough percentage of chromium for that to happen.
Right. So
aluminum definitely is not. That's for sure.
No, because I've tried to put bumper stickers on the outside, or magnetic stickers on the outside of the Tesla, and they just fall off.
Fall right off. Yep. You can only do it.
The only place is the tailgate. That's the only area that's magnetic. So, yeah. So, all right. Well, we've definitely spent some time talking about about all this stuff. So
this is going to be short. And
this was our short one. So just wait till we get, because I've got about 35 minutes of factory tour video. So we'll have some stuff to talk about when we get there. A lot of it's just kind of blurs as it's going back and forth, but we'll see what we get to. Anyway, I hope everybody enjoyed this, and please do leave questions in the description, in the comments, because we might try to answer some of those as we're talking about the next video in the series. And definitely like and subscribe and follow Scott at Going Ballistic 5 on X for sure, because you want more of this poetry, man. You got to have some more of that poetry.
Yeah, if you go around my profile, you'll find a couple in there. Tesla's Dream is in there.
It's good stuff. It's good stuff.
Do Tesla's Dream. Yeah, that's what it is. Yep.
All right, cool. Well, everybody have a great day, and we will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
Adios.